Did you say I was excited? That doesn't sound very excited. He's excited. I don't know about you, but I made a lot of mistakes over the years. Anybody ever made a mistake? I made a mistake one time. I drove my car to the gas station and I filled up the gas tank with gas and I drove off without paying.
Oh!
But as soon as I remembered, I drove back and I paid. Today, we're going to meet a man in a story from the Bible who made a lot of mistakes, did a lot of wrong things, did a lot of bad things. He stole a lot of money from a lot of people. So I need a volunteer this morning. And Shrek did such a good job yesterday. Maybe I'll pick someone else later in the week, but Shrek did such a good job yesterday. I'm going to use him again today, and it's for a very special reason. Today is a very risky part, and I don't want anybody getting hurt. If Shrek gets hurt, it doesn't matter. First of all, this man's name was Zacchaeus. And he was a very, very important man in the city. And he dressed very, very importantly. He was a VIP, a very important person. Now, the Bible does not tell us a lot about this wee man, Zachaeus. We don't know if he was married. We don't know if he had children. We don't know how old he was. But we do know a few things about him. First of all, we know that he lived in a big city called Jericho. And he was a very, very important person in the city of Jericho. He was what the Bible calls a chief tax collector. That means he was very, very rich. He had bucketfuls of money. And he rode a really nice camel. He lived in a really nice house. And he collected money for the Roman government from the people who lived in Jericho. And so he took his bucket. He took this big bucket of money and he went around all the people and shook them all down for money. And the people had to give him money or really bad things would happen to them. And so nobody liked Zachaeus. And so when Zachaeus came around, Zachaeus took more money from people than he should have. He stole money. So what do we do when we come across a bad person? What do we say? Boo! Zachaeus. But the funny thing is, Zachaeus did not care. He didn't seem to care what anybody thought of him, even though they hated him. And he just kept on collecting more and more and more money from these people. One day, the Bible tells us that Jesus came to town. And so now I need another volunteer, and Zach did such a good job yesterday. I'm going to use Zach again this morning, and Zach needs to put on his robe again, and Zach's going to play the part of Jesus for us. He had heard about all of the wonderful things that Jesus had been doing all over the country. For example, one day, Jesus went to a picnic with thousands and thousands of people, and they were all really hungry because they hadn't eaten all day. And somebody brought a little boy your age to Jesus. And all he had was his lunch that his mommy had packed for him. And Jesus said, "What do you got?" And the little boy said, "I got 5 loaves and 2 fish." Wasn't in a can, but you get the idea. And Jesus looked towards heaven and prayed to his heavenly Father. And then the most amazing thing happened. He began to break the bread, and he gave it to his disciples, and they began to spread the food around the thousands and thousands of people. And every single one of the people in the crowd that day was absolutely stuffed with the food from one little boy's lunch. That story spread all over the country, and Zacchaeus would have heard that story. Another time, Jesus met a man called blind Bartimaeus, and you get the idea what was wrong with him. He had been blind all of his life, and he would have walked around with a white cane because he couldn't see. And Jesus met him one day, and he touched his eyes, these eyes that had never seen all of his life. Suddenly, he's now able to see again. And it was the most amazing thing. And that story spread all over Israel. And Zacchaeus would have heard that story. Another time, Jesus was in a boat with his friends, his disciples. And they were out in the middle of the lake, and suddenly a big storm came up, and the waves were gigantic, and the wind was really fierce, and the spray was going on. Going to sink. And all of a sudden, Jesus stands up and he says to the storm, "Hey, cut it out." And the storm immediately stopped. And the disciples said, "Who is this who even controls the weather?" They were beginning to get the idea that this man, Jesus, was more than just a man. I'll give you one more example of the stories that were going all over the country that Zacchaeus would have heard. Another day, Jesus came into the middle of a funeral. And funerals are not fun. Even though the first 3 letters of funeral spell F-U-N. They're not fun. So I need a volunteer to be a dead body. Connie? Actually, Connie, I need a little boy, but it doesn't matter. You'll do it. All right, Connie, I need you to be a dead body. Just lie right down there on the ground. And Jesus comes across this funeral and this dead body, and everybody's crying. And Jesus walks up to the dead body, and he speaks to it was a little boy, but it doesn't matter, we got Connie here. But Jesus says to the dead body, "Sit up." And guess what the dead body did? It sat up, and guess what everybody in the crowd did? Their jaws dropped and hit the ground. They were in shock. And Jesus looked around at them all and said, "What are you all staring at? The kid's starving. He hasn't eaten in 3 days. something to eat. And so they brought him over a grilled cheese sandwich. And there you go, it's all yours. And by the way, you're going to have one of these for lunch today. It's good. It's not a big round of applause. Zachaeus has heard all of these stories. And he heard many, many more stories about what this wonderful person, Jesus, has been doing all over the country. And people are starting to say, he claims to be God. He claims to be God in the flesh. And now, Zachaeus has gotten word that Jesus is actually coming to town. He's coming to Jericho. He's coming to his city. And so, Jesus comes walking down Main Street of Jericho. Now, if you were in Jericho and Jesus was coming to town, what do you think all the crowds are doing? Zachaeus goes to the parade because he wants to meet Jesus, and he gets dressed up, and he probably didn't wear a wig like that, but he wants to see Jesus, and he comes out to see this parade. But there's another thing that I need to tell you about Zachaeus. He wanted to meet Jesus, and even though he was rich, and even though he was important, and even though he didn't seem to care that people hated him, there was something missing from Zacchaeus' life. Zachaeus knew that he was a bad person. Zacchaeus knew that he had stolen and done other bad things, and it seemed to be bothering Zacchaeus. And he wanted to meet this man that everybody was talking about. And there's one thing more I need to tell you about Zachaeus. The Bible tells us that Zachaeus was a wee man. I was a wee short man. He was small. And so you understand that when this wee short man comes out to meet Jesus and there's this big parade, if you're at a parade and you're really small, guess what you need to do in order to see what's going on in the parade? What do you have to do? You have to try jumping up and down, right? You have to try to jump. But Zacchaeus jumped, and no matter how high he jumped, he couldn't see over the crowd. And then maybe, if you can't see over the crowd when you can't jump, maybe you ask somebody, excuse me, but I can't see, can I squeeze in between you so that I can get to the front? If Zacchaeus had said that to the crowd, guess what the crowd would say to Zacchaeus? No. Does. He so much wants to see Jesus. He finds a sycamore tree and he climbs up into the sycamore tree. And he climbs way, way up high onto the branches of the sycamore tree. And he sits on a branch and he waits. Now he's got a bird's eye view of the whole parade. And I need Jesus to go down the aisle one more time. All the way to the back. but just keep walking up now. Jesus comes up the center street, and he's coming up to Zacchaeus' sycamore tree, and Zacchaeus can't believe that he's right underneath. He's right underneath Zacchaeus, and amazingly, you know what Jesus does? Jesus stops right under the tree where Zacchaeus is sitting. And Zacchaeus is maybe getting a little uncomfortable. He didn't expect Jesus to stop. And Jesus stops right under the tree. And he looks up at Zacchaeus. And you know what Jesus said? He says, Zacchaeus! Well, Zacchaeus just about dropped out of the tree. He couldn't believe. Hold on a minute, hold on. I should back up. And Zacchaeus can't believe it. How on earth does this man that Zacchaeus has never met in his life before know his name? And he stopped and he called him by his name. And Zacchaeus must have thought to himself, he knows me. How does he know me? And somebody had it right. Because he's God. He knows everything. Do you know that Jesus knows your name?
No.
He knows your middle name. He knows the exact day that you were born. He knows what school you go to. He knows everything about your life. I don't mean to get you worried, but he knows every bad thing you have ever done. He also knows where you live. And Jesus knew Zacchaeus. Then Jesus said to Zacchaeus, come down out of that tree. And Zacchaeus said, not only does he know me, but he wants me. He wants me. Can you imagine the excitement that must have been going through Zacchaeus' heart and mind in that moment? He was so excited he wanted to just see Jesus, and he goes up into this tree. Now he discovers that Jesus already knows him, and now not only does he know him, but he called him. He wants him. Do you know that Jesus wants you? Do you know that Jesus planned it out that you would come here this week to learn about Jesus because he wants you? And then he says to Zacchaeus, amazingly, Zacchaeus, I want to come to your house today for dinner. And Zacchaeus is absolutely amazed. Not only does he know me, not only does he want me, but he wants to come to my house for dinner. And Zacchaeus is thinking, nobody ever wants to come to my house because everybody hates me. Nobody likes me. And here is someone that I've never met before. And he wants to come to my house for dinner. Not only does he know me, not only does he want me, but he must love me. And Jesus brought you here today because he wants you to know that he loves you. And he wants and knows and loves you no matter how many mistakes you have made, no matter how many things you've done wrong. Even if you're here today and you think nobody likes you, even if you feel lonely today, just like Zacchaeus, nobody liked him, everybody hated him, but there was one who loved him. So Zacchaeus jumps down and brings him home, and he's so excited, and that he would have danced all the way down the road besides Jesus, and he's hooping and hollering and just can't believe it. house and he feeds him dinner. Jesus has so changed Zacchaeus' life that Zacchaeus takes his bucket of money and he says, you can stand up. He says, Jesus, you have so changed my life that I want to give away half of everything I own. So just Zachaeus said to Jesus, I want to give away half of everything that I own. And if I have stolen from anybody, I want to go to that person and I want to give them back what I stole plus 4 times as much. Because Jesus, you changed my life. And Jesus said to Zachaeus, you are the reason that I came to work as a man. I came to work to find you and to forgive you and to give you a new life. Okay, children, we're almost finished. Listen up, one more sentence. Jesus loves you and wants to forgive you for every bad thing, every mistake you have ever made in your life. All you have to do is ask Him. Now, last thing I want to do is read the story right from the Bible. Here it is. Then Jesus entered and walked through Jericho. There was a man there, and his name was Zachaeus, the head taxman and very rich. He wanted desperately to see Jesus, but the crowd was in his way. He was a short guy, and he couldn't see over the crowd. So he ran on ahead, and he climbed up into a sycamore tree so that he could see Jesus when he came by. When Jesus got to the tree, he looked up, and he said, Zacchaeus, get down out of that tree. Today is my day to be a guest in your home. Zacchaeus scrambled out of the tree, hardly believing what he was hearing, delighted to take Jesus home with him, and everybody who saw the incident was mad and grumbled and said, what business does Jesus have getting cozy with a crook? Zachaeus just stood there a little stunned. He stammered apologetically, Master, I'm willing to give away half of my income to the poor. And if I'm caught cheating, I will pay 4 times the damages. And Jesus said, today is salvation day in this home. Here he is, Zachaeus, the son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to find and restore people who have been lost. Isn't that a great story?